Princess Aura had never known defeat. For 300 cycles, her species ruled the empire with technology that could destroy entire worlds. Her weapons could level cities in minutes. Her fleet could conquer star systems without loss. Everything in her life had been victory after victory. She was born to rule, trained to dominate, and expected to expand the influence across the galaxy until nothing remained beyond their control. The people were logical. They did not feel emotion like other races. They did not make mistakes based on fear or hope. They calculated every move, planned every action, and executed with perfect precision. Princess Aura embodied this ideal. She had never hesitated. She had never questioned her orders. She had never felt doubt about her superiority over the lesser species scattered across the cosmos. But on the day she encountered the human, everything began to change. The first warning came from the sensor operators on the flagship Dominion. They detected an unknown vessel on the approach vector. The ship was small, almost insignificant in size. Its technology was primitive compared to standards. Its weapons were weak. Its shields would not even slow down a single energy blast from the Dominion's main cannon. The standard protocol was clear. Any unknown vessel that approached a warship without permission would be destroyed. There was no negotiation. There was no discussion. The threat was eliminated and the galaxy continued. This was how they maintained control. Aura sat in the command center of the Dominion, watching the small human ship on the display screen. She could order its destruction with a single word. No one would question her decision. No one would even know the ship had existed. It would simply cease, removed from the universe as though it had never been. She was about to give that order when a message came through the communication system. The human was requesting a direct channel to speak with the ship's commander. The audacity was stunning. A creature from a backward world, piloting a vessel that looked like primitive scrap metal, wanted to talk to a princess. Her advisors immediately recommended destruction. "Eliminate the threat, princess," they said. "This is clearly a tactic of deception. The humans may be attempting to distract us before launching an attack." Aura studied the small ship. She ran calculations through her mind, analyzing every possible threat. There was no logical reason to allow the communication. Every strategic principle taught to her since birth said the ship should be destroyed immediately. Yet something made her pause. Something made her decide to listen. "Open the channel," she commanded. The voice that came through was calm and steady. The human who spoke identified herself as Captain Sarah Mitchell. She did not beg for mercy. She did not threaten retaliation. She simply explained that her ship had been exploring this region of space, conducting scientific research, when it detected the vessel. She requested permission to pass through without conflict. The words were simple. The tone was direct. There was no fear in her voice, and this surprised Aura more than anything else could have. This human should have been terrified. Instead, she spoke as though she was addressing another captain, not the most powerful ruler in the known galaxy. "I am requesting a meeting," Sarah Mitchell said. "I believe we should talk before anything happens that we cannot undo. I am willing to come to your ship, alone and unarmed, if that is what is required." Aura's advisors erupted. This was obviously a trap. The human was trying to infiltrate the flagship. She should be destroyed immediately. The threat was too great. The risk was too high. But Aura found herself interested. She wanted to meet this human who spoke without fear. She wanted to understand why this creature thought it could negotiate with her. Perhaps this would be instructive. Perhaps this would show her something about the lesser races that she did not already know. "Bring her to the observation chamber," Aura ordered. "And do not harm her. I want to meet her myself." When Sarah Mitchell walked into the observation chamber, Aura received her first clear look at a human being. Sarah was small compared to the who were tall and lean and built for efficiency. The human was compact, with a different structure entirely. Her face showed everything she was feeling. Her eyes revealed her thoughts. She was transparent in a way that seemed impossible for a leader of any species. Sarah wore a simple uniform, no weapons, no armor, nothing but the clothes on her body and the confidence in her bearing. She looked at Aura without lowering her gaze. She did not show respect through submission or fear. She simply looked at the princess as one person to another. "Thank you for seeing me," Sarah said, and she extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. Aura had never touched a non. The very idea was unusual, but she found herself reaching out and taking Sarah's hand. It was warm, it was small, it was fragile. The human's fingers trembled slightly, but her grip was firm and strong. "I am Princess Aura," she said. "You have made a very dangerous choice coming here." "I have," Sarah agreed. "But sometimes the dangerous choice is the only one that makes sense. I would rather take a risk and try to understand you than sit back and assume the worst about your people." "Assumption is not required," Aura said. "I have studied your species. Humans are weak, emotional, and unpredictable. You survive through luck and reproduction. You are beneath notice." Sarah smiled. It was not a smile of submission or fear. It was the smile of someone who had heard such things before and knew they were incomplete truth. "We are weak by your measurement," Sarah said. "That is true, but we are not nothing, princess. We come from a world that wants to kill us every day. We survive not through strength but through something else. We survive through choice. We choose to work together. We choose to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We choose to keep trying even when we should have failed long ago." Aura did not understand how this was relevant. Weakness was weakness. Emotion was a liability. Cooperation was simply an inefficient way to distribute work. Yet she found herself wanting to understand more about this woman who spoke such strange ideas. "Why did you come here?" Aura asked. "Because I believe that understanding is possible," Sarah said. "I believe that two very different species can coexist without conquest. I believe that you are more than the cold logic you project to the universe." These words should have angered Aura. Instead, they intrigued her. For the first time in her life, the princess felt something that was not calculation or strategy. She felt genuine curiosity about another being. She felt the first stirring of something that her people had trained out of their species generations ago. She felt the beginning of a question that could change everything. "I will grant you safe passage through this region," Aura said. "You have shown courage and that has value. Perhaps we will meet again." But even as she said these words, both women knew the truth. This was not a simple farewell. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. The alien princess had met her match, and it was a human named Sarah Mitchell who carried with her the power to change everything. Sarah Mitchell did not return to her ship immediately after leaving the Dominion. Instead, she sent a message requesting permission to stay in the sector for further discussions. To the shock of everyone in her crew, Princess Aura approved the request. The human vessel was allowed to dock at a station controlled by the Empire. Sarah was invited to meet with the princess on multiple occasions over the following weeks. These meetings were not like anything Aura had experienced before. Sarah did not approach them as negotiations or strategic discussions. She simply talked. She told Aura stories about Earth. She explained how humans had evolved on a world filled with danger and chaos. She described the oceans that could destroy civilizations, the weather that could kill millions, the diseases that ravaged populations for centuries. She painted a picture of a species that had no natural advantages, no superior technology, no logical reason to survive at all. Yet humans had survived. More than that, they had thrived. They had built cities and art and music and literature. They had created beauty in the face of constant danger. They had learned to care for each other because isolation meant death. They had learned that weakness in others was something to protect, not to exploit. Aura found this fascinating and illogical in equal measure. She questioned Sarah on every point. If humans were so weak, how had they survived? If emotion was a liability, why had it not led to their extinction? If cooperation was inefficient, why had they not abandoned it for pure competition? Sarah never had simple answers. She simply knew that humans worked because they made the choice to work together. They survived because they refused to accept that survival was impossible. They thrived because they believed that life had meaning beyond mere existence. One day during a tour of the Dominion, an explosion rocked through the reactor chamber. Alarms screamed through the corridors. Soldiers ran in every direction. The fire spread quickly, consuming equipment and spreading toward the main power core. If it reached the core, the entire ship would be destroyed, along with everyone on board. Aura stood in the command center, calculating. The reactor chamber was sealed. The fire suppression systems had failed. The logical choice was to accept the loss and reroute power from other sections. It would result in the deaths of the workers currently in that section, but it would save the rest of the ship. It was a simple calculation. The loss of a few individuals balanced against the survival of the many. She was about to give the order when Sarah ran toward the reactor chamber, not away from it, not to safety, toward the danger. "Captain, where are you going?" one of Aura's officers called out. "The workers are still in there," Sarah shouted back. "I am going to get them out." She did not wait for permission. She did not calculate whether it was logical. She simply ran toward the fire, toward the danger, toward people she did not know. She moved with the speed and determination of someone for whom the choice was already made. The choice was to try. The choice was to act. The choice was to refuse to accept loss when something could be done. Aura found herself moving before her logical mind could process what she was doing. She moved toward the reactor chamber, not away from it. She moved toward Sarah, not toward safety. Her guards tried to stop her, but she pushed them aside. She was the princess. She made the decisions, and in this moment her decision was to go after Sarah. Together, they worked to prevent catastrophe. Sarah used quick thinking and human intuition to identify what needed to be done. Aura used strength and technology to carry out the work. They moved in perfect coordination, each one compensating for the other's weaknesses. Sarah saw solutions that the equipment could not calculate. Aura provided the raw power that human strength could not generate. Between them, they managed to contain the fire, shut down the reactor safely, and evacuate all the workers from the chamber. When it was over, they stood together in the corridor, breathing hard, covered in soot and ash. The workers were safe. The ship was saved. Everyone who could have been killed was still alive. Aura looked at Sarah with a new understanding. This was why humans worked together. This was why they valued each other. Not because it was efficient, but because when crisis came, you needed someone next to you. You needed someone to stand with you when logic said to run. You needed someone to believe that saving a stranger's life was worth the risk to your own. For the first time in her life, Aura understood emotion not as a weakness but as a different kind of logic. It was the logic of connection, of commitment, of choosing to matter in another being's life. Word of what happened spread through the fleet. The princess had rushed into danger to save a human. The princess had put herself at risk for creatures she had always claimed were beneath her notice. The commanding officers whispered about it. The soldiers talked about it. Even the politicians on the began to notice. Her senior commander approached her in the private chambers of the Dominion. He was an old soldier, highly decorated and absolutely loyal to the traditional ways of the empire. He had watched the princess grow up. He had taught her military strategy. He had always known her to be perfect, logical, and cold. "Princess," he said carefully, "your fascination with this human grows concerning. The people have begun to question whether you are becoming compromised by emotion. They wonder if your judgment remains sound." "My judgment is sound," Aura replied. But even as she said it, she knew it was only half true. Her judgment was different now. She was making decisions that were not purely logical. She was considering factors that did not fit into her calculations. She was choosing to value something beyond efficiency and power. "The human is manipulating you," said, his voice hard and certain. "She is using tactics designed to make you value her life over your duty. This is a threat to the Empire." "Sarah is not a threat," Aura said. "She is the first true choice I have made in my life. Everyone before her told me what to think, what to believe, what to value. She simply showed me another way of seeing the universe. That is not manipulation. That is enlightenment." His expression darkened. He bowed and left without another word. But Aura knew that something had changed. She had declared her position. She had chosen understanding over tradition. And now there were those in her own empire who would see that choice as weakness, and weakness as an opportunity to take power. The princess did not know it yet, but she had already become a target. And the only person who could save her would be the human who had taught her what it meant to stand beside another being when everything else was falling apart. The conspiracy began in the shadows of the military structure. Commander was not alone in his concerns about the princess. There were others, older officers and ambitious younger ones, who saw an opportunity in what they perceived as Aura's weakness. They believed that a ruler who would put herself at risk for a human, who would consider the value of emotion, was no longer fit to lead the empire. They believed that it was their duty to remove her and restore the empire to its pure logical path. Gathered his followers in secret locations where surveillance could not easily detect them. He showed them recordings of the princess rushing into the reactor chamber to save the human. He pointed out the moment when she allowed emotion to override duty. He argued that this was the beginning of a slow decay that would eventually weaken the entire civilization. If they did not act now, he said, the empire would eventually fall to the combined forces of the lesser species it had conquered. The plan was simple and brutal. They would create an incident that appeared to be an attack by humans on forces. They would orchestrate an explosion that would kill the princess and everyone close to her, including Sarah Mitchell. Then they would use the incident as proof that the princess's trust in humans had been a fatal mistake. They would take control of the empire, eliminate all policies of cooperation, and return to the old way of conquest and domination. Everything was prepared with military precision. The conspirators acquired explosives. They positioned people in key locations. They waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came when the princess announced that she and Sarah would tour the Dominion's command center together, a visible symbol of her changed views. Sarah felt the wrongness before she could explain it. She had learned to trust her instincts on Earth, where survival often depended on reading situations that the conscious mind had not yet processed. She noticed small things, the way certain officers moved, the way communication patterns changed slightly, the way people were positioned in corridors that did not match standard protocols. She mentioned her concerns to Aura, but in careful words that did not demand belief. She knew that the princess had been trained all her life to trust logic over intuition. She knew that asking Aura to believe in a feeling without evidence was asking her to do something that went against everything she had been taught. "I sense something is wrong," Sarah said quietly. "Not something I can prove or measure, just something I feel. I think we should leave the Dominion." Aura studied her. The princess had learned much in recent weeks about the value of human instinct. She had seen Sarah sense danger in situations that appeared safe. She had watched the human move through the universe in a way that was not logical but often proved correct. Yet this was asking a great deal. This was asking her to act on faith alone, without data to support the decision. "Why do you believe this?" Aura asked. "Because I have survived long enough to know that my instincts are usually right," Sarah said. "Because something in this situation does not match the pattern I expect. Because sometimes you have to act on what you feel before you understand what you know." Aura made her choice. She chose to trust Sarah. She chose to move without proof. She chose to act on belief rather than data. It was possibly the most illogical decision she had ever made, and it was based purely on her growing faith in this human woman. She immediately gave orders to evacuate the command center. Her guards questioned the command. The officers on duty questioned the command, but it was the princess giving the order, and in the military structure, the princess was absolute. Aura and Sarah had just reached the exit when the explosions tore through the command center. The carefully planned attack was triggered too early, as the conspirators realized that their target was leaving. The explosion was massive and devastating. It killed dozens of people who were still inside, including many of the soldiers who had been positioned to carry out the attack. Sarah grabbed Aura and pulled her down, shielding her body with her own as the blast wave washed over them. They hit the floor hard, and alarms began screaming through the entire ship. Emergency systems activated. Fire suppression systems deployed. The ship went into combat status immediately. Aura understood what had happened. There had been an attack. The attack had come from within her own military. The attack had been stopped by the instinct of a human woman who had felt what the logical systems had failed to detect. She stood up slowly, helping Sarah to her feet. The human was injured. Blood ran down her face. Her arm was bent at an awkward angle, but she was smiling despite the pain. "You trusted me," Sarah said. "Without data, without proof, you made a choice based on something deeper than logic." "You were right," Aura said simply. "Your instinct saved my life. Your belief that something was wrong was more accurate than all of our sensors." The investigation that followed was swift and brutal, and his conspirators were revealed. The scale of their betrayal was staggering. They had poisoned the military command structure. They had threatened the stability of the entire empire. And they had failed because the princess had listened to a human's intuition instead of her own training. Was brought before Aura for judgment. The old commander stood defiant, refusing to accept that he had been wrong. He proclaimed that the princess was weak, that the empire was doomed because it had chosen emotion over logic, that his vision of a pure civilization was the only path forward. Aura listened to his words, but she did not feel anger. She felt something more profound. She felt sad for a man who had lived his entire life believing that strength meant refusing to grow, refusing to change, refusing to accept that there might be value in beings different from himself. "You were wrong," she told, "not because logic is bad, but because true logic includes understanding that cooperation creates strength, that different perspectives improve decisions, and that a species that refuses to grow is already dying. You taught me to be a warrior. Sarah taught me to be a leader. A warrior knows only conquest. A leader knows how to build." Was stripped of his rank and imprisoned. The other conspirators were dealt with according to the laws of the empire. But more importantly, the empire now had proof that the princess's path was correct. She had been attacked by her own military because she had chosen a new direction. She had survived that attack because she had chosen to trust a human's instinct. And that survival proved that the new direction was not weakness, but a different kind of strength. Sarah recovered from her injuries, though her arm would never be quite the same. Aura learned something as she watched the human heal. Humans were not weak because they were fragile. They were strong because they endured. They kept moving forward even when their bodies were broken. They continued to believe in their mission even when believing would be easier to abandon. The princess realized that she had been studying the wrong thing all along. She had been focused on human weakness when she should have been studying human resilience. And resilience, she was beginning to understand, was the greatest strength of all. In the months following the failed conspiracy, Aura faced a question that would define the rest of her reign. She could suppress what had happened, return to the old ways, and rebuild the empire on the foundation that had served her for thousands of years. No one would blame her. The military would support her. The people would accept her decision without question. The entire system of civilization was built to follow such a path. Or she could do something that no ruler had ever done. She could admit that the old way was incomplete. She could acknowledge that the empire could be stronger through change than through conquest. She could begin the long and difficult process of transforming not just policy, but the fundamental beliefs of her entire civilization. Sarah advised her not to make the decision alone. This was itself a new concept for Aura. Leaders did not consult with others. They decided, and others obeyed. But Sarah insisted that the transformation required more than one vision, more than one perspective. It required the input of people who would be affected by the decision. So Aura did something unprecedented. She called together her military commanders, her civilian administrators, her scientific leaders, and representatives from the lesser species that lived within space. She presented them with two paths forward. The first was the traditional path of continued conquest and absolute domination. The second was a path of mutual cooperation, where different species would work together as partners rather than rulers and subjects. The debate that followed was fierce. The military wanted to maintain their power. The politicians wanted to ensure that interests were protected above all others. The lesser species representatives wanted guarantees that they would not be exploited. For weeks, the arguments went in circles. No agreement seemed possible. But then something unexpected happened. A young officer stood up and spoke. He said that he had seen the princess risk her life to save workers. He said that he had heard the stories of how human intuition had prevented an explosion that would have killed them all. He said that he believed the princess had discovered something true about strength and power that transcended the old ways. He pledged his support to the new path. One by one, others spoke up. Not all of them agreed completely, but they agreed that change was necessary. Even the military commanders, while reluctant to surrender absolute power, recognized that the empire could not remain unchanged. The galaxy was evolving. Other species were growing stronger. The only way to maintain influence was not through greater conquest but through greater understanding. The transformation was not quick and it was not painless. Trade agreements were renegotiated. Conquered worlds were offered autonomy instead of rule. Military bases were converted to centers of cultural exchange and mutual learning. Many resisted these changes. Many wanted to return to the old ways. But Aura stood firm, and behind her stood Sarah Mitchell, the human advisor who had changed everything. Sarah never took an official title. She refused to be called ambassador or representative or any name that would have defined her role within the official structure. Instead, she simply worked beside Aura, offering advice when asked, suggesting perspectives when discussions grew heated, and reminding everyone that the goal was not victory for any one species but survival and thriving for all. One day, Aura asked Sarah why she stayed. Why did the human not return to Earth? Why did she not go home to her own people and her own world? Sarah stood in the royal gardens of the palace, surrounded by plants that did not exist anywhere else in the universe. She looked at the princess who had changed from the cold, logical ruler she had first met into something more complex and more human, for all that she was. "Because this matters," Sarah said simply. "Because what we are building here has never been tried before. Because I believe that when species work together instead of fighting, something beautiful happens. Because you believed me when I told you that humans had value, and I wanted to give you the chance to prove that belief was correct." Aura placed her hand on Sarah's shoulder. It was a gesture she had learned from humans, one that meant trust and partnership and something deeper that did not have a simple word in language. "You have given me something that no was ever supposed to have," Aura said. "You have given me the ability to change, to grow, to see beyond the narrow way I was trained to think. Most of my people would call that weakness, but I call it liberation." The changes spread across the empire like light breaking through darkness. New laws were passed that treated all species as having intrinsic value. Trade routes were opened that benefited all participants equally. Centers of learning were established where and none could study together, learn from each other, and work toward shared goals. The military was restructured. Instead of a force designed purely for conquest, it became a force designed to protect all species within its sphere of influence. Soldiers found themselves working alongside humans and dozens of other species. They discovered that these other beings were not inferior, but simply different. They had different strengths and different perspectives and different solutions to problems that seemed impossibly complex. Not everyone was happy with the changes. There were those who saw the new empire as a betrayal of their heritage. They formed resistance groups and sometimes took violent action against the policies of cooperation. But they were the minority, and even they could not deny that the empire was stronger in the new configuration than it had been under the old one. Aura realized that true power was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to inspire. It was not the ability to dominate, but the ability to lead others toward a vision they came to believe in. And she had learned that power from a human woman who had walked into her life carrying nothing but courage and faith that understanding was possible. After 3 years of continuous transformation, the empire was no longer an empire of conquest. It was an alliance of species working together for mutual benefit. The change had not been easy. It had required Aura to abandon everything she had been taught about her own superiority. But what she gained in return was something she had never had before: the genuine respect and partnership of beings different from herself, earned not through force but through her willingness to listen, to learn, and to change. 3 years and 4 months after Sarah Mitchell first extended her hand to Princess Aura, the greatest assembly of species in galactic history gathered at the ships from 1,000 systems arrived in orbit. Representatives from civilizations that had feared conquest for generations came to participate in something that had never been attempted before. They came to create the Alliance of Species, a unified government based on principles of mutual respect, shared decision-making, and commitment to the protection of all member worlds. The founding ceremony was held in the grand chamber of the palace, the same location where Aura had once made decisions about conquest and domination. Now she stood before an assembly of equals. She looked at the humans present, the dozens of other species that had lived under fear of expansion. She looked at beings that she would have destroyed without hesitation only a few years before. "We have gathered here to create something new," Aura said, her voice steady and clear. "For thousands of years, the belief that strength meant domination. We believed that our superior technology and our logical minds made us destined to rule. We were wrong." The chamber fell silent. No ruler in history had ever admitted such a thing. No leader had ever stood before her own people and declared that the foundation of their civilization was wrong. "The thought we understood strength," she continued. "We did not. True strength is not found in weapons or in the ability to destroy. True strength is found in the willingness to listen to those who are different. True strength is found in the decision to build together instead of conquering alone. True strength is found in a species like the humans, who come from a world that wanted to kill them every day, yet they still chose to learn cooperation instead of domination." She paused and looked directly at Sarah Mitchell, who stood in the diplomatic gallery. The human was no longer merely an advisor. She had become something far more important. She had become a symbol of what was possible when different species chose to trust each other. "I was told that humans were weak," Aura said. "I was told that their emotions were a liability, that their short made them unworthy of serious consideration, that their planet had no value. I was told this by every authority I had known, by every teacher I had trusted, by every military officer who had guided my training. I believed all of it because it fit with what I had been taught about superiority." Then I met Sarah Mitchell. She was just one human. She commanded a ship that was nothing compared to our warships. She came from a civilization that should have been insignificant by our measures, but she had something that no amount of technology could replicate. She had the ability to see possibilities beyond destruction. She had faith that understanding was possible. She had courage not because she was powerful, but because she chose to be strong. The princess stepped down from the platform and walked toward the center of the chamber. All eyes followed her. No one spoke. No one moved. "This alliance is created on principles that I did not invent," Aura said. These principles were taught to me by humans. Humans taught us that all species have value. Humans taught us that diversity makes civilization stronger, not weaker. Humans taught us that the choice to cooperate is more powerful than the choice to dominate. They learned from humans, and today every species here learns from each other. She looked back at Sarah Mitchell. I would like to formally recognize the contribution of Captain Sarah Mitchell to the creation of this alliance. She risked her life to show us that peace is possible. She stood beside me when I was threatened by my own people. She taught that strength and compassion are not opposites. As the chamber erupted with sounds of agreement and support, Sarah found herself surprised by emotion. Humans experience tears differently than the cameras of the assembly could fully capture, but everyone present understood what they meant. A human woman had come to an alien world, faced impossible odds, and changed the course of galactic history not through force but through faith. After the ceremony, Aura and Sarah walked through the palace gardens together. They had made this walk many times in recent years, and it had become their private time, away from the demands of transformation and the weight of historical responsibility. Here, among the strange plants and unusual flowers of the world, they could simply be two individuals who had changed each other forever. "Do you regret it?" Aura asked the same question she had asked so many times before. "Coming here, leaving Earth, your entire world." Sarah stopped walking and turned to face the princess. She looked at the being who had once been willing to destroy her without thought, who had become someone capable of admitting error and choosing growth. She looked at the garden around them, at the strange beauty of an alien world that had become more familiar than Earth had ever been. "No," Sarah said. "I came searching for something new in this galaxy. I found you. I found a civilization willing to change. I found a purpose that mattered. There is nothing on Earth that could compare to what I have found here." Aura smiled. It was an expression she had learned from Sarah, something that came from genuine happiness rather than from politeness or protocol. It was a very human expression on a very face. "The universe thought the princess was the powerful one," Aura said. "It took a human to teach me that the greatest power is the power to change, to grow, to choose to see value in those who are different. Every day I am grateful for the choice you forced me to make. Every day I understand more clearly that you were right. We are stronger together." They walked deeper into the gardens, where the light of the sun created shadows among the strange plants. Behind them, the palace glowed with light from the gathering still happening inside. But here, in this quiet place, it was just the two of them. A human and a captain and a princess. Two individuals from different species who had discovered that the most important difference was not between their genetics or their technology, but between the choice to remain closed and the choice to remain open. The universe had tried to tell them that they could not understand each other. The universe had suggested that their differences made them enemies, but they had chosen a different path. They had chosen to listen. They had chosen to learn. They had chosen to build something together that neither could have created alone. And in that choice, they had changed everything. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were working toward a shared future. For the first time, the most powerful civilization had chosen wisdom over domination. For the first time, a human had proven that strength was not measured in weapons, but in the courage to believe that peace was possible. The alien princess had met her match, and it was a human woman named Sarah Mitchell. The story of what they built together would be told for generations to come, a reminder that the greatest conquests are not of worlds or empires, but of hearts and minds and the barriers that separate different species from understanding each other.